Hi, everyone.
Go.
Hello, welcome.
Welcome and happy Saturday to all of you. This is a one-off Saturday session. So thanks for joining us on your weekend.
We'll just give people a couple of minutes to arrive. So, as we've explained previously, this is live on YouTube. If you'd like to share the link with any friends or family, maybe share it on Facebook or Twitter or some social media now. Just pasted the YouTube link in the Zoom chat.
And also, if you don't want to appear on a public YouTube video, then please switch your camera off now. I just got muted. But yeah, do switch your cameras off because it's being live streamed.
Oops. Ooh. There we go.
Hi, Stephen.
Okay, it's a couple of minutes past 5, so maybe we can kick off.
Yeah, let's do it. So hi everyone and welcome. Nice to see all of your faces, and also hi to everyone watching our live stream. We're very, very excited for this bonus session of the Tools for Regenerative Renaissance course that we've been running the last 5 weeks, and we're just approaching the final week of now. Just a little bit about the course. It's a 6-week better than free course sponsored by our wonderful sponsors Seeds, the regenerative cryptocurrency. You can visit their website at www.joinseeds.com. And the course is basically a group of 100 participants, and we're going through a 6-week journey where every week we focus on a different area of what we're terming the regenerative renaissance. So in the first week we focused on seeds and kind of introducing the course, getting to know each other. Week 2 focused on regenerative agriculture and thriving local economies. In the third week, we looked at regenerative money and heard from CELO and Circles. And then in week 4, focus on decentralized organizing and horizontal leadership, hearing from Samantha Slade of Going Horizontal. And then last week in week 5, we looked at cooperative ownership, in particular focusing on platform co-ops with Trevor Schultz and Derek Razzo from Purpose. So that's just a little overview of the journey we've been on, and now we're in our final week, and very sadly we'll have our final session next Wednesday, but before that we've got this very special bonus session with Charles Eisenstein, and I'm going to pass over to Stephen in a second to introduce Charles. But before I do, I just wanted to share in the Zoom chat the link to the Slido, which we use to collect questions. So if you're coming laden with questions already, just put them in there, and then you can also use that link as we go through for collecting your questions and upvoting the questions that you like most. And with that, I'll pass to Stephen.
Great, thanks, Phoebe. Well, Charles will be no stranger to most of you, I imagine. His work is featured throughout the course. The 3 books, Sacred Economics, The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible, and Climate, A New Story, were some of the recommended reading. We've also featured a podcast From Dehumanization to Sacralization on the State of Emergence podcast with Terry Patton. And the really beautiful kind of updated 12-minute summary of the book Sacred Economics, which is available on YouTube. And of course, Sacred Economics has just been re-released, and it seems which seems appropriate given this new wave of interest in cryptocurrencies and in new forms of money. Really exciting. To hear, as we did from Seth Kambar from Cello, actually some of the experiments and suggestions in Sacred Economics actually sort of being put into practice in with that currency, and indeed with Seeds as sponsors of this session. So it's a great pleasure to welcome Charles today. Yes, as Phoebe mentioned, for the first hour or so, we're going to be leading the conversation, but please do pop questions that come to you in the Slido, and in the second hour we'll be fielding those. If you'd like to ask your question in person, make sure you put your name as in the Slido. Otherwise, if it's an anonymously upvoted question, we'll have to ask it for you. So, yeah, welcome, Charles. And we thought we'd start with something, the obvious question, which is on this term, the regenerative renaissance, and just inviting you to speak to that term, the regenerative renaissance. What does that mean to you, if anything?
Well, thank you, Stephen. Thank you for having me on. All right, I guess I'll plunge into it in that case. Regenerative Renaissance. Well, I'm just going to think on my feet here. Renaissance is a rebirth. I guess in a way, regenerative and Renaissance they go together. They mean almost the same thing. But maybe we're really looking at a rebirth of humanity as a collective, or a rebirth of civilization, or a reincarnation of civilization from one that is geared toward growth and extraction and exploitation, and that sees nature as an instrument of its own progress, its own utility, its own benefit, to a civilization that understands itself as part. I'm sorry, there's something's happening here.
We've taken care of that. It's okay.
Yeah. Transitioning to a civilization that understands itself as part of a larger ecological whole, and that understands that the first task in this new and ancient understanding of who we are is to heal the damage that has been done. So there we get to regeneration. So civilization being reborn in a regenerative mode, or a participatory mode, a healing mode, a mode of service to life. So yeah, that's like the big picture conceptual understanding that I have of that term.
And Charles, I'll just come in here. When you're imagining this vision, or this, maybe it's not really a vision, maybe it's a feeling, like it's a sense of this regenerative renaissance and where we are right now. Could you speak a bit about the journey that we are or need to go on from the place we're at right now and the place we would like to be going? And the kind of terms that come to mind are Joanna Macy's names for this current time, these three different stories of business as usual, the great unraveling, and the great transition. And yeah, being alive in this like extremely complex and weird time. Yeah, any thoughts on how we get from here to there?
Yeah, many people are speaking to the same thing that we sense. For a long time, I thought that our transcendence of the story that we've been living in was inevitable, that we would have to change in order to survive, that our current systems of control would eventually be unsustainable, that we could no longer grow economically on a finite planet, and so forth. My views have changed on that. I don't think that we're going to be forced to change. I think that we are constantly invited with greater and greater insistence to change, but that we can always resist that invitation. And that therefore, what we face is not an inevitability. Many of the terms that you invoked, like a great turning, they sometimes land on the listener as a prediction, and therefore as an inevitability, but they are not. They are, in their truth, they are to orient us to a choice that is a collective choice and also a personal choice. They are pointers to a possibility. And if the intentions of those who coined these terms are fulfilled, then they also exercise a kind of a prophetic speech. Prophetic speech meaning words that speak something into existence, because they name a possibility that then people are enrolled into. So these words, a great turning, for example, or humanity's coming of age initiation into the tribe of all life on Earth. That's one way that I've described it. All of these terms are they're invitations for us to act in alignment with that future that's possible, not inevitable, but possible.
Maybe I can follow up on that. And so yeah, I hear you speak of humanity's choice there in a way. The full title of this course is Tools for the Regenerative Renaissance. So with I'm wondering, as something you've written about before, whether you have any words on how we can find this right balance between using tools to like get things done, to get working, to like making change, versus these qualities of non-doing or playfulness, or if you like, trusting in the inherently regenerative capacity of Gaia.
Yeah. The issue is our ability to recognize the proper application of those tools. So it's not so much the tools themselves, it's the attitude that from which we use the tools, and also the attitude from which we develop the tools. I'm not going to say that tools are purely neutral. Tools themselves embody intentions. It's like nuclear bombs, for example. It's not like, oh, well, it's a neutral thing and it depends on how you use it. Like, no, an intention is built into the tool. So there are some tools of technology that may not be very useful in the world that we are all wanting to see. But generally speaking, most of the tools that we have today are used to create results by imposing design or imposing intelligence onto a world that our civilization assumes has no intelligence of its own. So if anything meaningful or beautiful or purposeful is to happen, then that purpose must come from ourselves. And we use the tools with that attitude, which means that that we are oblivious to any other purpose, any other design, any other intelligence that might have already been there outside of human beings. When we use our tools in a different mode, then we start with a listening to see what wants to happen. We ask questions like, what does this river want? What does the mountain want? What does the land want? What does the soil want? How can we contribute to the health, to the well-being, to the livingness of all that is around us? And when we ask those questions, then we know how to use the tools. This is not about withdrawing from nature, leaving no trace, and abstracting ourselves from spirit, from materiality. And that's like the fulfillment of human destiny, because obviously we're bad on this earth. No, it's about assuming our right role. So the question that you're asking, Like, what is the right use of technology? This question is answered not by me saying, well, this is right and that's wrong, but by entering the state of being and the state of perception that I've just described.
Mm-hmm.
Then the answers become clear. And you know, like, oh, in this place, maybe a strong intervention is necessary for the land to heal faster. And in that place, maybe we don't really need to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
You know, maybe the soil needs some additive here and somewhere else it doesn't. How do you know that? And what guides that decision? Heretofore, it has mostly been guided by profit, by how will our technological intervention in the world enable us to extract more from it. When the guide is what will contribute the most to the livingness and complexity and biodiversity and health of the world, then the question of what is the appropriate use of technology has a very different answer.
Mm.
Yeah. So I mean, I could go through a list of like, here's the good ones, here's the bad ones, but that list is much less important. For one thing, it's based on my own flawed, limited perceptions, and secondly, it's much less important than where that list comes from. So rather than say, here are the technologies that I like, agroforestry, bioremediation of toxic waste, like I could go through some things. Rather than give you that list, I'd much rather share where that list comes from.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But one of the frames that came to mind for me there was that we've looked at in courses is domination versus partnership, which Rihanna speaks to a bit. Tools of domination versus tools of partnership. And I mean, maybe given that you mentioned that like so much of the reason for employing tools and technologies in this modern world is profit, maybe we can take a little turn towards economics and money for a second. And just given that the re-release of Sacred Economics, I imagine some of this is a little higher up your mind than it has been. And I guess what I'd like to ask is, how important do you see the development of new forms of money like seeds or indeed Cello, that I believe you're an advisor for, in ushering into existence this story of interbeing, of participation?
Well, I think that these experiments in different forms of money are important. Even ones that that have serious flaws, like Bitcoin. They at least suggest that money, as we have known it, is not some law of physics that we just have to adapt to, but that it is a human creation. Here someone came along and created Bitcoin, and it's being used, well, kind of as money, actually more as a speculative asset, but like the idea, at least it suggests that money is an agreement among human beings, and we could forge other agreements than the ones that we have right now. And then so some of the later generation cryptocurrencies, like Cello, like seeds, like circles, these are taking seriously the power of the what story and what agreements are embedded, what story is embedded in the agreements that form the currency, and how could that story align with an ecological world? So I can't at this point endorse any one of them as being the solution, but I think that we are moving towards something that could supplant the kind of money that we have today. I noticed some questions down in the question thing here about negative interest, and some more detailed questions, which I'd be happy to get into also. But maybe are you saving those for the second half?
I think okay. We'll save them up. Yeah.
All right.
And then Phoebe had a follow-up on this.
Okay. I actually had another question come to mind, which is like, I wonder about, let's say by some miraculous event, we had a global council to redesign the economy, and we just decide to do that. I'm curious about how much of the deeper stuff would also need to change, like how we think about value, like not just like even the word economy means so many different things. I mean, the root of it comes from the Greek word for our home, our kind of shared home, and I'm just thinking about like what are the things that would need to change in terms of the way we value or cost something like a tree, and the fact that basically that's impossible, that there are these things that are impossible to put numbers on. I think it's one of the biggest questions I'm asking at the moment, is measurement of the intangible and the kind of immeasurable.
Yeah. So a lot of thinkers, a lot of economists, a lot of environmentalists have observed that nature is treated as if it has no value. That when you destroy a landscape to take, say, the copper ore from it, that the cost of that ore does not include the damage to the environment and the damage to the people who live there or future generations or anything like that. So they say, well, in order to reflect the true cost of these, we should make polluters and extractors pay, so that copper ore becomes much more expensive because it takes into account all of this damage. If you cut down a rainforest, like, it causes ecological harm that today is off the balance sheet, and that should be brought onto the balance sheet. So I understand, like, the motive for this is very, very good. It's to like give some value to something that we've treated as having no value. The problem, of course, is, and this is, you've hinted at this, is that what should that value be? How do you calculate the value of a tree or of a forest or of a whale? One way to try it is through carbon credits, to calculate its contribution to carbon sequestration or something like that. But that, it values some things, but how much is a whale worth if you calculate it that way? How can you even make that calculation? Like, to even pretend that you could calculate the value of something, put a number on it, means that you think that you understand the totality of its effects and relationships. It's only thinkable in a reductionistic worldview, where you can understand a complex object by cutting it up, analyzing it. Analyze means to cut up, actually, to cut it up into its parts, evaluate the contribution of each part, multiply all the factors together. Like, even that way of speaking, this is a factor, that's a factor. When you multiply factors together, there's no nonlinearity.
Yeah.
You know, it's so this is getting a bit abstract, but just to say, like, just here, I mean, just an obvious example. If we say that this virgin forest, or the fish, the North Atlantic ecosystem or something is worth, say, $50 billion, then by that logic, if you could make $100 billion by destroying it, you should do it. Because after all, it's worth 50 billion, right? We just agreed on that, didn't we? And who is going to make this evaluation, this assessment that it's 50 billion? Probably that decision will be influenced by powerful interests who are going to make 100 billion from it. Like, that's how it always works out. And we can see, like any reduction of the sacred to money is asking for desecration.
Nevertheless, like, as you said at sort of the beginning of that, like, it's the intentions of many of these people are good. And actually, something we heard Sepp from Cello speak about is that one of the things that he sounded kind of quite optimistic about and quite excited about is to be able to give a a value and let's say like, you know, and a really high value to rainforests and so on, and actually so that is one more incentive to protect them. So I have the sense it could be a both and, you know. It's like, is it possible to recognize their immeasurable kind of, you know, spiritual value to us, and also give them like some kind of economic value? It strikes me as perhaps doesn't have to be either or there.
Yeah, I don't think it's black and white, you know, and I think it's certainly better to give them some value than to give them no value at all. Yeah, but ultimately, like however we do it, we have to also acknowledge their sacredness, their infinite value.
Because I would worry about the possible downsides of putting any kind of number. Like, as soon as you put a number on something, it makes it tradable, it makes it dividable, factorable, all of those things you just talked about. So I think it's a really interesting dilemma.
Yeah, and we see this happening like in real life, you know, where carbon credits, like the purchase of carbon credits, like there you are, you know, out planting trees. You know, you're working for some nonprofit, you're out planting trees, you think you're doing such a good thing. And that nonprofit is getting funded, by, say, an airline or a mining company that says, yes, you know, we are cutting down the trees to mine this copper ore, but we're offsetting that. We're planting 2 trees for every tree that we cut down through this nonprofit. So here's, you know, this 20-year-old like believing that he's doing some good thing. And then at some point he realizes that what he's actually doing is licensing a mining company to destroy, you know, a virgin watershed. So like that's the kind of danger that happens when we reduce things to numbers, because if you reduce this forest to numbers and that forest to numbers, then you can offset one with the other. But you can't do that if you hold each place on earth sacred. So you know, and in a way that in part the devil's in the details. Like maybe we shouldn't be able to do offsets in that way. Like maybe there are ways to administer our ecosystems and to embed their value or their valuableness into our economic system that can minimize some of these abuses. But we have to be aware of them. Yeah.
Definitely, Phoebe.
And you've spoken before, I think, about the kind of adolescence of like the human species, and inherent in some of what you're saying is this assumption that we can know how much something is worth. We can quantify, you know, this is worth 2 trees, but thereby making a comparison between, for example, like an old growth forest and, you know, 2 trees that we plant without knowing the species that are inherent to that area of land, without having the context, without there's a kind of hubris to some of this, and I'm interested in whether you have a kind of developmental view on our, you know, our stage as humanity at the moment. Yeah, anything to say about this kind of hubris and the sort of self-reflection and self-awareness we may need to make decisions like that?
I have an awful lot to say about it. But I'm curious what, you know, like that question sounds like you're kind of making a generous offering for me to speak about something that I often speak about. But I'm wondering, like, what's your right now, like, personal passion and curiosity that's really alive in you, that it's not something that you've heard me say before and you want me to give me the opportunity to say it again because it was beautiful, but like, what's really on your mind? Because the fact that you asked that question means you've already absorbed what I've said about that. So like, rather than just giving me a platform to say something, like, I'm actually more interested in what's where's the juice right now for you? If I may be so bold as to invite that.
Sure. Happy to share. I did want to give you a bit of an opportunity to talk about that stuff, knowing that it's something you think about, and also wondering where you're at, because I think, you know, the last time I read something by you on that topic was over 5 years ago. So I was curious about where your thinking is at right now. The thing that, I mean, if I speak about what I'm passionate about at the moment, is this idea of moral imagination and the role of the imagination at the moment, and the kind of moral responsibility to imagine, especially when it comes to kind of decision making and governance and these kind of things.
Yeah. What is moral responsibility to you?
That's a really good question. That's a question I often ask people I'm working with in this work. I think moral responsibility is something we all can feel in ourselves. I don't think it's something to be defined from the top down. And I think that's something really, I think that's actually at the core of that inquiry for me, is like, how do we re-find our sense of what is right, instead of being told what that is, institutionally or in school, especially because when people tend to stray off the path of the kind of establishment institutional truth, they can become liable to getting swept up in, you know, fake news or groups like QAnon. And, you know, so I think I'm really interested in that question of kind of self-sovereignty and a sense of knowing what is right, and how people can build an immunity to the sort of like mass media manipulation and stories that are given to us by the establishment.
Yes, a sense of what is right. In the tradition of Western philosophy, how do you know what's right has been conceived of as an application of a principle, like the Kantian principle of you know, the categorical imperative: do act as you would that if it were a standard for everybody, then it would bring the world that you want to see, you know, or the golden rule. It's kind of like it's a principle. And I have noticed that people are very good at invoking principles to justify things that they do for shadow reasons, for hidden reasons. So for me, when I face this question of what is the right thing to do, I already am looking at, okay, what does this right mean, and how much of right encodes programs of approval seeking, of group acceptance, of being a good boy, and how much of it is coming from a knowledge of what is mine to do in this moment. How do I recognize that? And this is relevant to the question of, you know, to the issue of you know, mass media manipulation and QAnon, you know, and fake news and all of that. Like, we are living in a time where we're like in this whirlwind of confusing, contradictory information, where the various factions, the various viewpoints, they don't even agree with each other on what facts are there to be reasoned from. Like, there's not even a debate that's possible. Debate requires at least something you agree to cite as evidence, you know, something to talk about. But the various sides don't even agree on that. And so this does bring up the question, what do I trust? How do I know? And when the media environment is so full of manipulation and these echo chambers, you know, these collective selection bias platforms, like all that stuff in the social dilemma, but beyond that too, like not to mention like the propaganda of governments and corporations and that whole complex. Like, how do you know? How do you know what's right, what's true, and what to do? And I think that in such times, we can only come back to direct experience, the direct experience in our bodies, the direct experience of what we've witnessed in the world, what we've seen happen, what we've experienced ourselves, what people we trust report to us about their experience. And it's like we kind of have to build our edifice of knowledge from the ground up, starting anew, because we are immersed in a sea of lies. Not always conscious lies, but you know, it's not like there's one truth out there amidst all the lies. And if you only find, it's so alluring, you know, to want to. That's why QAnon was so popular. It's like here in amidst this breakdown in meaning, where you don't know what to trust, here's the truth.
Here's a story.
You know, it's such a relief in that. Yeah.
So this has been a topic you've written about quite a lot over the past year or two. I mean, it reminds me of some of the themes on your recent essay to Reason with a Madman. And maybe now's a good time to pull out a quote that really inspired me from that essay. For years, I've written to the power of the story. It's time for me to deploy this technology fully in service of a new mythology. Exploratory prose generates resistance, but stories touch a deeper place in the soul. They flow like water around intellectual defenses and soften the soil so that dormant visions and ideals can take root. I was about to say that my goal is to encode the ideas I've worked with into fictional form, but that's not quite it. Is that what I want to express is bigger than exploratory prose can accommodate. Fiction is larger and truer than nonfiction, and any explanation of a story is less than the story itself. So this really struck me by the suggestion that you're going to maybe keen to kind of take a turn into a different kind of work, and maybe which I see as slightly distinct from the kind of sense-making space that maybe you've been engaging with for a little while now. So I'd love to hear where you're at with that, and maybe particularly with reference to that phrase that it's stories touch a deeper place in the soul. Fiction is larger and truer than nonfiction.
Yeah. So yeah, what I was calling expository prose, you know, where you make an exposition, you know, you say, here's what is, and here's some concepts, and I can explain it. You know, it's something that explains. Well, any explanation is a reduction. There's always something in a phenomenon that's outside of your explanation of it, just as there's always something in a forest or in a soil that is beyond your chemical analysis of it. Like, you reduce it to every part that you can identify, and you still haven't captured the whole thing. So what science does to the world, our minds also do to reality itself, reducing it, packing it into a set of concepts, explaining it. And there's a comfort in that. There's a certainty in that. Whereas we are, especially in this culture, uncomfortable in the unknown, in the uncontrollable. Like, if you can explain it, then you can kind of control it. Like, you have at least the start of being able to control it. The world makes sense. I know who I am in it. Like, I've reduced the mystery to an explanation. And you know, I'm not saying that we should never try to explain anything. Explanations are powerful. Reductionistic science is powerful, but it cannot, well, in the latter case, reductionistic science, it cannot meet the problems that we face today. It can, our habitual reflex to respond to failures of technology, to failures of control with even more of it, has really hit a glass ceiling. And by the same token, my I don't know, I was just feeling, when I wrote that essay, I was feeling like quite some frustration. It's like, I mean, not that, I'm the smartest guy in the world, or that, everything I say is right, but, I'm like, I've kind of explained the origin of this crisis for a long time, and what good has it done? And maybe like I don't know, people who are listening to this who are evangelists for some kind of regenerative technology, whether it's social or ecological, agricultural, whatever, medical. I mean, you can apply the regenerative renaissance to many fields. Maybe some of you are kind of tired of explaining it also, tired of the resistance, feeling like you're hitting a limit. And maybe you've also experienced the power of story, that you can tell, I mean, like, this just came up. You can tell somebody's story or your own story, and you can't argue with it. You can't. Stephen Jenkinson said something like this. He said, there's no story in an argument, and there's no arguing with a story. Like, that happened to me. Like, you can't argue with it. So like I host an online community, and one of the women there, she had been an MD, I think, and she left the profession and her mother had been a scientist doing pharmaceutical research for one of the major pharmaceutical companies. And so she told the story of how her mother was, like, basically required to keep her job to falsify data. And they published this big study that was the result of cutting out all of the data that showed that their drug was no better than their competitor's drug. And they just basically blatantly falsified this study, and this was routine. And so she tells a story of how her mother left the industry, and the changes that happened. And that story, I think, is a lot more impactful than an abstract argument that the pharmaceutical industry is corrupt.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the figures, and here's the dollar, and here's the lawsuit total of, that they were forced to pay in compensation, and here's the documents, and here's the whistleblower. Like you can lay out all of that evidence, but what you are assaulting with that evidence is a belief. Like, you're trying to convince somebody, right? You're assaulting a belief that was not itself formed from evidence and logic. You are not going to change somebody's mind with logic when they didn't come to their belief with logic to begin with. Mm-hmm. This is a self-delusion. It is a conceit that we choose our beliefs based on evidence and logic. Mm-hmm. I could give you a lot of evidence and logic to back up my claim that we do not choose our beliefs based on evidence and logic, but everybody thinks that they're open-minded and rational, but they're not. There's a lot of psychological studies that amply demonstrate this. So why should we think that we can change people's minds in a different way than they came to those beliefs to begin with? That's the power of story. It goes under those defenses.
So you've spoken there mainly to the power of personal story, and I think you make a distinction in the essay, or you say that, there's two particularly powerful types of story. There's personal stories, but there's also fiction, and you sort of hint at that maybe that you've actually started working on some kind of fictional work or of some screenplay or something like this. So just wondering if you can speak to that a bit, and maybe, if you like, give us a sneak peek of what's going on there, where you're at with.
Well, it seems like those are two very different kinds of stories, or two very different uses of the word story. Like, let me tell you my story, and here I made up a story. I don't think that they're actually that different. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, they're both given in a way. As a storyteller, one can learn to identify what the story is and what the story isn't. Like, there's a story waiting to be told, and it recruits you to tell it. There's also a story waiting to be lived, and it recruits you to live it. Mm-hmm. But both of these kinds of stories can exercise the same power on the listener. So, yeah, I have some stories that want to be told. One of them actually is something that happened to me, and the other is something that came to me. But yeah, I'm not going to go into the details or even a basic plot line right now. No, yeah, I'm not going to go there.
This links kind of nicely to this topic of moral imagination in a way, because what I sense in some of your work, Charles, I still remember in New Zealand, where you read out a short excerpt of your book, The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible. And the excerpt was a story that blurred the boundaries between what is story and what is this moment right now. And that's something I'm really, really interested in, because I think that as a tool allows people to imagine something else could be possible. And the story in particular was the one about, I don't remember it exactly, but it was about how there's a group of people and they wake up and they find themselves in this space, and you know that basically they're asked to go back to Earth to try and I think
the story is called A Gathering of the Tribe.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah, it's an example of a fictional story that's true.
Exactly.
Yeah. There's a lot of fictional stories that are true. Truth is not the same as facts. Hindus and a lot of Native Americans, like people all over the world, have stories that say that the world rests on the back of a turtle. It's true. And if you show them a picture of the globe, you know, from outer space, look, no turtle, they're like, they won't think that that disproves it. It's like, yeah, that's what the Earth looks like from outer space, but also the Earth rests on the back of a turtle. Like, and I think everybody can feel something true in that. So the gathering of the tribe is about why we are here, marooned in a world that feels on some level alien. I'm sure I'm not the only one who sometimes, especially in the last year, is like, wow, do I really want to be here? This is crazy. Like, who sent me to crazy land? And in fact, what the story fleshes out is that we volunteered to come to crazy land, drawn magnetically by the work that needs to be done that corresponds with the growth that our soul wants to accomplish. So, yeah, we came here on purpose, and that is why every human being has a yearning to fulfill their gift here, like this feeling like I'm here for a reason, and if I don't exercise my gifts in service of that reason, then I don't feel like I'm alive. I feel half alive. I don't feel like I'm here for what I'm supposed to be doing. It's intolerable. That feeling, you can bribe or threaten somebody to ignore it, but eventually the body itself rebels.
This is reminding me of actually a book I'm reading right now, which is The Journey of Soul Initiation by Bill Plotkin.
I was about to mention Bill.
He's at the Animus Valley Institute, and I mean, maybe I'll personalize this if I can. But maybe when did you first become aware, or how did you first become aware of something of your, what your soul was called to do, and your personal narrative in this lifetime?
Oh, it wasn't a before after watershed. For some people, it is. For me, it was it started as stirrings of discontent with the program of life that I'd been offered. and various forms of rebellion, covert rebellion against the program. Covert rebellion meaning like procrastination, laziness, kinds of self-sabotage, addiction, like lack of motivation. Lack of motivation is a good thing if what you're trying to do is not what you're here to do. So so it started as kind of a negative, like an aversion to what I was supposed to do, what I was told to do. And eventually I learned to recognize what I cared about. I mean, really the call to purpose is care. It's the things that get under your skin, that you cannot abide by them being that way. You've got to do something about it. That's the call. So and you don't necessarily have to be able to articulate exactly what your mission is in order to follow the mission. All you have to do is respond to what you care about. And at some point, it might be useful to try to articulate it, but also to know that anything that you can put into words is, for one thing, temporary, like your purpose evolves as you do. And secondly, it can't capture the whole thing. It's trying to, again, put something into words that's bigger than words. So I often would just suggest to people to feel the presence of your purpose, to feel within you that, yeah, I am here to do something. I was put here with a gift and I have to enact it. Like it's burning in me, even. If the flame of that gift isn't radiating out into the world, then it burns you.
To think of our own lives as stories, and each one of us is the character in something potentially epic.
Epic, yeah, and maybe not in a way that is celebrated or even seen by society. The epic could be very personal. Maybe no one ever knows it. But on your deathbed, you review it, and you'll be like, yeah, that was epic.
This kind of connects also, it all connects together. It connects to the numbers on the trees. It connects to the question of scale, connects to nobody ever knowing what you do, but you knowing it was the most important thing you could have done. It's kind of, it's all one fabric of pattern, I think, that we're talking about here.
I do remember you, Phoebe, from New Zealand.
Nice.
Yeah.
What shifted your memory there then, Charles?
Just in this conversation, I'm like starting to remember you.
I need to turn a light on, actually. We're about to... It's getting really
Phoebe, you found a nice quote kind of on this theme that maybe we could read out, which is from the essay, The Age of We Need Each Other, where you wrote, Charles, I began to understand that our concepts of big impact versus small impact are part of what needs to be healed. Our culture validates and celebrates those who are out there with big platforms speaking to millions of people while ignoring those who do humble, quiet work, taking care of just one sick person, one child, or one small place on this earth. It strikes me that's, for many people, that's well, let's say maybe many people kind of doing this course might be something quite difficult to come to terms with. People that are maybe aware of the immensity of the problem out there. They think there's so much work to do, and now and then maybe even now we've the purpose of this course has been to kind of equip them with system changing tools. So then if the call comes of actually I have a sick relative that needs looking after, like how can one find peace with that like a different kind of different direction is required.
Yes, it's not about, okay, we've got some solutions. How do we scale them up? And there will be opportunities to scale or to, create conditions for solutions to go viral and so forth. But what we are facing, as you said, is so huge that any plan that we make that remotely comes close to addressing the full problem will be ridiculous. Such a plan will be completely impractical. It'll be way, way beyond, there is no plan that we can conceive of. And one reason for that is that the ways of change in this world far transcend the modern mind's understanding of cause, of change. We have other faculties that recognize what is an important act and what is not. And sometimes those faculties, these heart faculties, contradict the mind's assessment of what is big and what is small. Like the mind thinks, okay, if I'm going to say, for me, I'm going to be on a podcast and it has 500,000 listeners, this is an important one. This is a bigger one than being on this course, which has, I don't know, 50 or 100 people listening. But is that necessarily true? Do I know that for sure? It could very well be that maybe in a more intimate setting, the interaction reaches somebody more deeply, or it was just the right person there. And maybe that person is the one who scales something. Or maybe that person reaches somebody else and it's that person who scales something. In the world of 500 years from now, we may not be able to easily trace exactly how it came to be that the world healed. So this anxiety that comes from, am I doing enough? Am I doing a big enough thing? Does this count? And oh gosh, now I've got to take time out to do something little, to be with my grandmother, to attend a funeral, to do these things that actually make life real. Like that anxiety is a product of the same mentality that has caused the global crisis to begin with.
It strikes me that I might suggest that many of us have this sense that if there is this regenerative renaissance, if we do manage to create this new kind of civilization, then that will be a civilization based on deep care, on deep love, and deep integrity. That's why I'm hearing in your words that the suggestion is to move more deeply into all of those qualities before we worry about the kind of impact on even on the timescale of our own lives, to instead just head more deeply into those qualities in each moment with each invitation.
Yeah, it's not even me urging you to move more deeply into those qualities. It's simply to kind of give you permission. It's to illuminate the fact that you already want to move more deeply into those qualities, and to let the mind's guard down and say, yeah, it's okay. If what your regenerative tool is called to right now is a very small thing, that is okay, because you don't know. Like I think of what's his name, Masanobu Fukuoka, the Japanese farmer who wrote One Straw Revolution.
Fukuoka, right?
Is it Fukuoka? I thought it was, anyway, I'm not sure how to pronounce the last name. But he is one of the most influential farmers of the 20th century. Like as far as seeding a movement that and impacting literally millions of people, millions of farmers. He's one of the most impactful. And it was not that he set out to do that. He basically was, an academic agronomist, in graduate school or whatever. And he decided to quit and go back to the family farm and listen to the land and farm in a very, very simple, natural way, using less and less effort to accomplish more and more, because he was not in opposition to the forces of nature, but was super aware of them. Like, he did that, and he was completely unknown for decades. And 20 years into it, someone could have come and said, hey man, yeah, you're doing something nice here, but come on, the world needs to change, and you're just doing one little thing on one little plot of land. You're wasting your time. You got to be out there on the lecture circuit. You got to be doing something big, not doing something in obscurity in this remote Japanese village. Get off, this is just like a indulgent, like you're not getting anything done. The world is in crisis. You got to move. You got to do something big. However, what happened over the ensuing decades is that people began to discover him, not because he was trying to promote himself on YouTube. People started to come. More people started to come. They experienced something there that lodged inside their bones, and it changed them. And they changed other people. And without trying to launch a movement, he launched a movement. And I want to say that for those of us who say, well, we need to launch a movement. We need to start a movement. How do you actually start a movement? You don't do it by trying to start a movement. You are moved by movements. Movements move people. That's why they're called movements. A movement wants to happen. And to invite that movement into the world, we have to act our part in that movement. It calls us to move. It calls us into action. And every person who joins the movement in their own way, big or small, I'm not saying to avoid big, I'm not saying if you get invited onto a podcast with 500,000 people that you refuse it, but it's an attitude of devotion, whether it's big or small. And anytime that you do that, anytime that you act in devotion, moved by the movement, you are actually issuing a prayer to the movement that says, yes, we are ready for this. For example, me. Like the smallest action becomes a statement of readiness on behalf of humanity for something to happen. And that statement or that prayer exercises mysterious effects. It pulls on hidden threads of causality that are so far beyond our comprehension that, unless you're like in the midst of a psychedelic journey, they're totally invisible to us. So, gosh, and I hope this isn't, too metaphysical for a practical, action-oriented course. But can we take our break now and maybe people can think on that for 10 minutes and then we can come back?
Yeah, we were just exchanging in the chat that we've gone a little over for the first half, but we'll still take our break. Maybe we'll say 7 minutes instead of 10, just so that we can have enough time for the participants' questions. So if we come back at 11 past and start again. But thank you so much, Charles, especially that last piece that you just spoke about. You've kind of it's restoring a sense that magic is real and that anything is possible. It's a beautiful place to stop.
Thank you, everybody. We'll see you in 7 minutes. Okay, welcome back, everybody. I suppose we better wait till Charles is back as well.
Yeah.
So let's find a link to that Slido.
Yeah, I've just been looking through the questions that are there so far. I've just given people a chance to kind of cast their final votes.
Yeah, just pasted a link there again. Okay. Phoebe, do you want to field this first one then?
Sure. So we're just going from the kind of top down. Maybe I just want to give Charles a chance to have a look at the sorts of questions that are coming in, because obviously we won't have time for all the questions, but there could be ways of weaving multiple together.
Sure.
Okay, I'm looking now. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Let's see here.
There's a lot of questions around kind of designing and weaving new economic systems. One from Cece, who is here from Seeds.
Given she's here, maybe we could invite Cece to explain her question herself. If we can find her on the list, let's see.
I just found her.
Aha, you're with Rieki, I see. Just asked to unmute there.
Hey guys.
Yeah, hey, take it away.
Okay. Hi, Charles. Thanks for being here.
Hi.
You've been a huge inspiration in the Seeds movement, so thank you for sharing all your wisdom. My question actually is around governance. So the citizens of Seeds, they govern this new financial system. And so I wanted to know if you had any particular wisdom for them on how they can evolve the tools that we're using in this sacred economic system.
Yeah. Yeah, for me to like give that kind of feedback, I would have to like really tune into Seeds and how it works, and a bit of the history and what challenges, have come up, and like to really do that properly. I can't just give abstract advice. Well, I can maybe just a little bit, which is just to say that this idea of community governance is, in my opinion, the way we have to go, because it makes explicit that, as I said before, money is an agreement. And some of or many, in fact, like starting with Bitcoin, of the cryptocurrency paradigms, are an attempt to make money something independent of messy human whims. We'll have an algorithm decide how much money is created, for example, so that it's not, subject to interference and manipulation. But that's an attempt to abdicate the responsibility and the sacred nature of money, which is that it is an agreement. It's something that we do together. It's the crystallization of an agreement about what's valuable. So I think that this, like that you're onto something very important, even with this question. And then, beyond that, it's like, okay, well, how are you implementing it? Like a lot of currencies, they say that they are backed by, biodiversity or backed by something good, but they're not actually backed by it. They just say that they are and believe that they are. So anyway, there's, yeah, I can't really, fully answer your question or go into that right now.
May I add a little follow-up, which is, what kinds of people do we need to be? What are the qualities that we might need to cultivate in order to effectively govern a new kind of monetary system? I think that was at least part of where that was coming from.
We have to be dedicated to something bigger than ourselves. Yeah, it's just that simple. And as a community, to remind each other of that. and maybe to have practices to counteract the habits of separation, the habits of greed, the habits of self-interest maximization, and then also to understand that those habits are not the result of some moral failing, but they are themselves products of circumstances. You put somebody in the modern box of a life, independent of the plants and animals and people around them, mediated in their interactions with the world by technology and money, and they are going to exhibit all of these moral failings. So this is one reason why well, alternative currencies can be a way to change those conditions that generate the kinds of people that we have been being. And also, we're not fully victims of our circumstances either. We can ignite in each other the sovereignty to not be slave to circumstances and to step into the being that we actually are and want to become, which is a being of service, of devotion. So yeah, it's about community, it's about environment, and it's about practice. All three.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a sort of follow-up question. Maybe it's around this tension of being in the old system, or the system, the current dominant paradigm, and people who are in that right now and struggling, trying to change it from the inside, and yet slowly finding over time that more and more they are influenced by being within that. And then the seemingly untenable alternative of kind of leaving the system and then opting out, and the kind of the sense of kind of giving up or failure in that decision. Have you struggled with that tension yourself? And if so, where have you found yourself in that tension?
I could make a very strong argument why you have to work within the system. And I can make a very strong argument why it is a waste of time to try to work within the system. Probably many of you have both of those arguments in your heads as well. So how do you choose? And I think that it's a matter of learning to recognize where you are to be. Are my gifts being received here? How do I feel waking up in the morning to go about my day? If your gifts are going towards something, towards needs that are being met by the gifts, that's what gifts are for. They're to meet needs, right? If they are doing that, then that throughput of life energy will feel good. And you will feel happy and excited to greet your day. And if that's not happening, if you wake up depressed, if you have to drag yourself out of bed, that might be an indication that your time in this place is coming to an end. You can trust your body. And it may have nothing to do with your work. It might be your some relationship or some other aspect of your life, the place you live or something like that. But it is a communication. And yeah, I would answer the question that way rather than, with an argument about why it's important to work within the system or why it's futile to work within the system.
Thank you. Jacob Rask, are you there?
Yes.
Let's see if we can spotlight you. Hang on. Here, how do we do this? And spotlight. Okay. Oops.
He was there.
That wasn't right. Beg your pardon.
He's here.
Great. Jacob, you have a question on the inevitability of transition. Take it away.
I find it really fascinating. It was one of your first comments that you made. You said you changed your mind on whether this new story, this transition, is inevitable. And I just thought, what made you change your mind?
Because if it was inevitable, it would have happened already. And also because our power as human beings is immense. We can create whatever we pray for, whatever we can envision. Yeah, and also, I guess, because of my growing understanding of the primality of choice. So, yeah, just those things.
Okay. Let's take a bit of a turn, perhaps, and call on Sam if you're there. Let's, Sam, yeah, I see you, Sam. Phoebe's going to spotlight you.
Yeah. And then we've also got Paul up next after.
Sam, go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, my question was to reflect on the writing that you did last year on the sort of what you see when you look into the dark mirror of Trumpism and the QAnon kind of phenomenon. And I guess how you feel looking at it now, as you know, we're a couple of months into the Biden administration. We've had the Capitol riots. We've got a new stimulus. Like it just seems like a very new environment. I'd kind of like to know how what you're thinking now, looking at the United States.
Yeah. 2 months into the Biden administration, there are still those who believe that Biden isn't president and that Donald Trump is still secretly president. They're not letting go of their alternative mythology. And that is, I mention that, not just for humor's sake, but because it's the tip of an iceberg. None of the forces that generated Trumpism or its more extreme variants like QAnon have magically disappeared, because they didn't come from like some random delusion. They came from a profound dispossession and loss of trust in established authority, loss of faith in the basic narratives of our culture, the sense that we're on the wrong path, the sense that we're being lied to all the time. I mean, a lot of this distrust comes from very, very valid reasons. Like, we have been lied to pretty much constantly and manipulated, like this. So even like racism and xenophobia are also in part coming from a sense of like, in their current incarnation, they're coming from a sense of dispossession and unfairness. Like, it's not supposed to be that way. And so that feeling, which is legitimate, gets projected onto, other races or other objects of hate, or, an elite cabal or whatever. Like, but just because the identified object of those feelings is wrong doesn't mean that the feelings aren't coming from a valid source. And that has not changed. Like, none of the things that generated Trumpism have disappeared overnight. So right now it's under the surface. Like, Trump was an eruption of this to the surface, but it's not going to go away. And if the causes are not healed, then we're going to see a much worse Trump in 4 years, in 8 years, in 10 years. I don't know.
Thank you, Sam. Question. I'm actually going to spotlight a couple people who have asked questions now. So we've got Harry. Spotlight. Hi, Harry.
Yeah, I'm going to super quickly answer the one about negative interest rates because it takes 30 seconds.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Fabi, you're arguing, or did you put Fabi on anyway?
I'll put Fabi on, yeah. 1 second.
Okay, because that one's so easy to answer.
Can we only spot like 4 people at once?
Okay.
Okay,
All right, well, if you're going to put them on later, then, or I could just, I'll
hang
just
on.
answer it now because it's so quick. It's that the reason that negative interest rates have so far mainly benefited the rich is because of how they are implemented, by flooding the financial system with enormous amounts of essentially free money. Like that's the only mechanism that central banks currently have to bring down interest rates. And what I advocate in the book is a completely different mechanism. It's a liquidity fee on bank reserves, which actually allows negative interest rates in tandem with a tightening of the money supply. So anyway, if you read that part of Sacred Economics with that guideline in mind, then maybe you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay, that one's done.
Fabi, did that answer your question? Do you have anything you wanted to respond or say?
No, that responded that part of the question. I do have another question surrounding the negative interest rates, in that it kind of says it's a very negative, we want to prevent hoarding of money. And yet it seems that some, or let's say to incentivize consumption today rather than consumption, delayed consumption seems also, I have some tensions around that part. Or you would be incentivized to keep some of the money for later, kind of.
You can still, with negative interest rates, you can still keep money for later, but you can't grow your money by keeping it. Therefore, the motive to save money is no longer because I will get richer and richer and richer by merely having it and lending it out at interest. It's because I actually have something that I'm saving for. So, you know, because on a big scale, like the very, very wealthy, they don't earn their money by doing, they earn by having. They extract rent of various kinds from the rest of us. So negative interest rates prevents that from happening. And maybe I don't want to get more technical than that.
Thank you.
But that's the big picture. Yeah.
Thank you. Harry, you were about to ask your question. Please go ahead.
Hi, Charles. Thank you so much for making time to speak to us. It's been a really great conversation. My question speaks to, so I have quite bad eco-anxiety, and I hang out in communities with other people who have pretty severe eco-anxiety. In fact, my inspiration for joining this amazing course was that. And my question is, what message do you have for like children and young people growing up in these uncertain times? Yeah. Anything to speak to?
People have anxiety in the face of something beyond their control. Anxiety has a positive dimension, which is the communication of your soul saying that something is not right around here. And when you have not yet identified what is wrong, anxiety is a good thing. You know, did I leave the stove on? You know, did I leave the faucet on? Like, there's something wrong here. Got to find out what it is. Once you find out what it is, and maybe that's a step toward a bigger understanding of what's wrong. But once you have located something, then anxiety is no longer your friend. It only comes, if you're still anxious, it's coming from another source. And it might be in the disguise of eco-anxiety, but it's actually a deeper anxiety coming from our society's teachings about who you are and what power you have to change the world. So when you understand where that's coming from and how that is a false teaching, then you will no longer feel anxious. You will feel maybe urgent. You will feel on purpose. You will feel energized. You will feel, purposeful. You'll know what to do. You'll be in action. And you will understand that despite the despite the enormity of the problem and the mind's conditioned perception that nothing you or all of us together could do is possibly enough, despite that, you will know that what you are doing is exactly what's needed. And you'll be able to let go of the anxiety. So, because again, I'll just say it again, the world does not work as we've been told. It is not a battle of force against force against force, and the biggest force wins. There are other operating principles. And as you align with that truth and act from that place, you will not feel anxious. Yeah. So again, the anxiety is communicating something to you.
And the message to children and young people during these times, do you have any words to that?
Depends which young person, which child.
I guess so.
Yeah, it's not a universal, often I would say to trust in the intelligence that put you in this place and in this time. That all children and all humans, but all children are a gift to the world to meet the need that the world has at that moment. And you can feel this. Teenagers feel a sense of great expectation, a sense of their own magnificence, an impatience with the sellout, an idealism. All of this is true. And so when I speak to young people, I like to affirm that, to arouse that knowledge and confirm it and say, yeah, and trust that. And you'll know what to do because you've been put here to do what you are here to do. And you'll know what to do. It's not too late. And you are enough. And you know it.
Thank you so much.
Okay, let's invite Paul to put his question forward next. Are you there, Paul? It's possible. It looks a little bit. Oh, yes, looks like he's just dropped off. Okay, then Melina, take it away.
Thank you, Charles, for me also. It kind of ties with Harry's question a little bit, and it has to do with beliefs and also how you mentioned that we've marinated in these contexts, wherever we live, the society we live in. And so we have many things that are deeply rooted into us that may not be aligned with what we're trying to bring forth. So my question is the people that some of us probably that are willing to do the work, how do we go about making peace with our beliefs? Because this is an ongoing journey. So that is part A, and part B is, how has this journey been for you? And how do you continue on it?
How do we make peace with our beliefs? Can you just remind me what beliefs exactly you're talking about? The ones
beliefs that may not be aligned with the world that we're trying to bring forth, that we actually would not like to have.
Yes. So it's already an evolution to recognize that you have beliefs that are not aligned with the world you want to see. Because belief is not an intellectual idea. A belief, the intellectual part of a belief, the part that you could put into words, is just the surface level of something that penetrates all the way into your being. I'd like to say a state of belief is a state of being. And we attract opinions as like this kind of clothing on that state of being. So to change a belief is a big thing. It's to change who you are. And what you're identifying is an internal contradiction, an incoherency that happens when you are migrating from one state of being to another state of being, and therefore from one belief. And it's usually not one belief that changes at a time. It's a whole system of beliefs that corresponds to a deeper change. So to make peace with that, it's to recognize that, oh, I am in a process of change, and I have incompatible beliefs. I have beliefs that contradict each other. I believe two things at the same time that contradict each other, and this is a tension in me. It's uncomfortable. It's painful. I am in a process. And then maybe you will exercise your choice to, it's not that you force your beliefs to change, but it's that you seek out physical and social and intellectual environments that nourish the part of you that corresponds to the beliefs that you really are now starting to identify with. So you seek out help. And it's not like, oh, I'm gonna just seek people out who tell me that I'm right. You can identify nourishment on a deeper level than that. Because sometimes it might be like some of the old beliefs that you say you want to let go of. Okay, maybe there's also old beliefs that you cherish and that are gratifying, that make you, that are addictive even. But there you might find people who you trust to identify those and help you recognize that, oh yeah, actually that one too is no longer who I want to be. So it's not about finding an echo chamber, but it's finding, you could almost call it a sangha, a spiritual community who stand for what you want to become, and the beliefs go along with it.
Thank you. Beautiful comment by Stephen. A community like this one.
I wonder how the communities kind of stay in touch with each other as well, because I think I've been thinking too much about fragmentation and fracturing and, little small enclaves of communities that kind of surround themselves with people who reinforce the ideas of that community. And I'm also curious about the work of bridging divides, listening, healing the massive rifts between different groups, even groups within the progressive left who won't even speak to each other because they have slightly different ideologies. I've got a question around that kind of bridging.
Yeah. So communities do form around certain sets of beliefs and the state of being that accompanies them. And they might be very doctrinaire, but they are a sanctuary for people stepping into that particular state of being. And they serve, even a cult could be like this. The positive contribution of cults is not well recognized. They host you for a while and you grow into that state of being. But if the community is rigid and doctrinaire and a cult, then it will not accommodate growth beyond that. So the best communities are ones that grow as a community and don't just lock people into a certain set of beliefs or state of being, but they're always evolving themselves. And if you're very fortunate if you're in such a community. If you're not, if you're in one of the rigid ones, then you'll just outgrow it. And what was once like so, oh, I'm home, you know, I've come home, I found my tribe, I found my people, eventually becomes stifling. And then they'll say, oh, you're just resisting, you know, or something like that. They'll have an explanation for that. And at some point, you know, again, it comes down to your body and trusting your feelings, not the mental interpretation of the feelings, but trusting that this feeling is telling me something.
Thank you, Charles. I'm going to invite Paul to put his question forward next.
Thanks. Hi, Charles. Apologies for the lighting here. I know it looks like I'm in a brothel, but I promise you I'm not. So I read the book Natural Capitalism around the same time as I read your book. So
Paul, sorry to interrupt. Your microphone's very, very loud, so maybe you can speak quietly.
Okay. Yeah, I'll hold it a bit further away as well. I read the book Natural Capitalism around the same time as Sacred Economics. So that was the idea that the right kind of capitalism or a sustainable capitalism could change the world. And it looks like the World Economic Forum, under the name The Great Reset, are looking to implement that now after the pandemic. So I was just getting your thoughts around that, the idea of conscious capitalism changing the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I read Natural Capitalism way back, maybe around this, no, before you did. I read it early 2000s, 2002 or something. And I was like, wow, it's all just around the corner, you know, leasing economy and zero waste, you know, full cycle, et cetera, like cyclical economy and so forth. Because he made such convincing arguments that it was inevitable and like already happening, and yeah, I waited and it didn't happen. But still, some of the ideas in there are very natural. I mean, it's called natural capitalism because it describes an economy that works like an ecology. And yes, some of the ideas in it have found their way into World Economic Forum discourse. But there's a piece of it, and this is one reason I wrote Sacred Economics, that a regenerative or cyclical economy is at odds with a money system that is linear or exponential. And in fact, what we call capitalism is fundamentally tied to that money system, to a money system based on interest, essentially, which requires that more and more of the world be consumed by the money economy. So in a part of the lineage of Sacred Economics actually was natural capitalism. And I'm like, okay, but here's what has to happen to the money system for this vision to come true. And it's going to be pretty hard for the economic powers that be, the financial powers that be, to let go of their power to create money through interest-bearing debt. That is so fundamental that I think that you know, to get out of the debt trap, the only way out is either wealth redistribution and debt cancellation or rapid growth. And it seems like everybody still wants rapid growth. Like that'll be the solution to all our problems. Then the poor can grow out of poverty, and the rich don't have to give up anything. Mm. And that growth paradigm does not accommodate the best of what Paul Hawken is advocating.
Seems like it's a nice segue to a question from Rieki, who's one of the co-founders of the Seeds cryptocurrency. Rieki, take it away.
Not a co-founder, but that's a different topic. Yeah, I was just going to say that. Perfect segue, actually. So my question is, you know, we get to create new types of financial systems where we get to program into how those financial systems behave different characteristics that create the society we'd like to see. So you mentioned one of them, which is to remove interest-bearing debt on the creation of money. But I'm wondering if you have any other suggestions on what's some of the most important considerations when we're reprogramming programming financial systems, what it might, entail and consist of. Might be one that needs a little bit more lead-in, but no pressure.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm getting very, very tired when I am on like this for more than about an hour and a half. I start to hit a wall. So I'm doing my best to concentrate here. Yeah, I guess another piece is to really look at beyond, is money created through interest-bearing debt, is how is it created? And today, in general, it's created through like when a bank lends money into existence, who does it lend the money to? It lends to the person with a business plan who's going to create economic goods that can be bought and sold. And those are the ones who get, they get the money, they hire the people who then contribute to that project of creating more economic goods. But what this world needs right now is not actually more economic goods, more of the things that we typically exchange for money. We need actually the opposite. We need the kinds of things that are qualitative, that are not commodifiable, that don't enter the market economy, that were the province of ancient gift cultures, people taking care of each other, people cooking for each other, growing food for each other, touching each other, healing each other, making music together, taking care of each other's children, building each other's houses, like living together. That those kinds of relationships don't need to be mediated by money. So, but those people who devote themselves to that kind of thing, which, some people do more, some people do less. Maybe some people are, microchip designers, and what they do is very much amenable to standardized, commodified global economics. But other people don't do that kind of work. But money only goes to the first kind. So there has to be, I think, in the money creation process, something like a universal basic income, where money seeps from the ground up through everybody, and not only through those who are creating saleable goods. So I hope that made sense to you. That was just kind of off the cuff, but there's something along those lines. And I'm aware of the hazards of a universal basic income when it increases dependency on the state to lock in the destruction of small business and independent livelihoods. Like, I'm not oblivious to that. Yet there's something right about it, that we don't have to coerce people to be productive and then channel that productivity towards the kind of economic activity that we have today. Yeah.
So maybe if I could summarize what I got out of it, you can tell me if I'm right, is how do we decide how to make money? What do we prioritize? So consciously considering that. And how do we create a grown-up economy that is no longer just growing quantitatively, as in size, goods and services out there, but growing qualitatively, so it begins to act like how humans grow after we've reached the maturity size. So that's also rethinking, where we're directing economic rewards to. And then the final one is, I wrote it down and I lost it, but how do we coordinate, essentially? Because I think that's at the heart of what a UBI is that you're mentioning, is delivering value to the places that we feel like we need to deliver that value in order to meet certain outcomes. So this has been rethinking how we coordinate rather than just rethinking money, because that's just a tool for coordinating. We can think of different ways to start coordinating.
Yeah.
Some of the way of thinking about it.
Yes, yes, that's all right. And it has to do with what we hold sacred, to recognize that money properly, like what it wants to be, is a token of what we hold sacred. Like that's the next level of what we hold valuable, is what we hold sacred. So suppose as a society, we decide to hold motherhood sacred. Well, maybe the way money gets created is that it appears in the accounts of mothers. Doesn't mean only mothers can use money, but that's where it starts. And then if you want to earn money, you have to do something that's in service to mothers. Like, for example, okay, that's the kind of thinking that I would advocate. Like, if what you're doing is not useful to mothers, no one's going to pay for it. In some way, like down the line, useful to mothers. And I think that there is something here about the feminine and like upholding the feminine principle as the center of life and conceiving the masculine as being in service to life rather than dominating life. So I would like to see that understanding translated into money somehow.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Charles. I'm conscious of, what you said, that you're reaching the end of your Zoom time. So I wanted to wrap up and I think just give a moment for everybody to just absorb what we've just heard and talked about. And if there's anybody who has a deep sense that they have something they want to say, something that wants to be spoken in this moment, then please do raise your hand, and we could just have one more contribution, one more voice before we close. And if not, then we can close.
Well, it seems like you've brought everyone to a place of peace, Charles. So I think that's something to celebrate. And maybe my closing comment is that, going back to the value of story, of fiction, so that's I think kind of what we're doing with this course, or trying to do with this course, is actually, as a community, like step into a new story, to actually write a new story, filled with all kinds of tools, practices, which are not actually fictional, but are all available now, but maybe they're weaving together, they're practicing all together as a community, would be something new and would actually take us to a very different place, and certainly be a step towards this more beautiful world our hearts know is possible. So I'm so grateful to you, Charles, for inspiring me personally, and so many of us here, that new story is possible. And and my gratitude to all of the participants of this course and everyone that's been involved with Seeds for coming together in this way and supporting one another to actually build that new world. So I so look forward to continue weaving that new story together. And we have one more session to go, as you know, that final session on Wednesday. So far, for your benefit, Charles, we've had guest experts in each week, whereas for this final session, there are no external experts. We're just inviting 5 participants to be the experts and to share on 5 topics that are important, to some of our participants. It feels like a fitting end to, having taught about decentralized organizing and horizontal leadership and so on. So yeah, I know Phoebe and I are both really looking forward to seeing what you have to offer on Wednesday. So yeah, that's about it from me. Phoebe, any closing thoughts?
Just a very warm-hearted thank you. Thank you, Charles. Thanks for your time. Thanks for the questions as well. And maybe we can just let everybody unmute and express their thanks in whatever way you wish to. We can just all unmute together and give a warm-hearted thank you.
Yes.
Obrigado.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charles.
So much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, friend Mary.
Thanks, Charles, Stephen, and Phoebe.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I just meeting you again. And yeah, we'll see you on Wednesday. Have a great week.
Bye.
Much love, everyone. See you next week.
Goodbye.